Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I would like to start the Dissertation Council meeting dedicated to the defense of the dissertation written by Izotova Margarita seeking the academic degree of candidate of psychological sciences in the degree field 190010 correctional psychology on the topic correction of the emotional sphere of the adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation by means of music theory. The decree of St. Petersburg State University dated on the 30th of January 2020 stipulates that I, Oksana Vladimirovna Zashirinska, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Associate Professor of the Department of Pedagogy and Pedagogical Psychology of St. Petersburg University, I was appointed chairperson of this council in accordance with the other requirements that were issued by the university. Our Dissertation Council session is taking place on online in an online mode, and I would like to mention now the names of my esteemed members of the Dissertation Council: Lyudmila Mednikova, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor Department of Oligophenopedagogy of Russian State Pedagogical University, Yuri Matasov Yuri Timofeyevich, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Oligophenopedagogy of the Russian State Pedagogical University, named after Herzen. Can you hear us? Yes, you can. And when you speak, please switch on the sound, and when you stop speaking, switch off the sound. Yelena Evgeny Vaknin, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Associate Professor of the Department of Clinical Psychology and Psychological Assistance, St. Petersburg Pedagogical University, named after Herzen. And Matanova Vanya Koleva, Vanya Lukova Matanova Koleva, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor, Director of the Master's Degree Program in Clinical Psychology of Sofia University. Can you hear us? Yes. And also Margarita Khadzhumarovna Izotova, the candidate seeking a degree. Can you hear us? Yes, I can. And also the scientific advisor of the defendant, Svetlana Timofeyevna Posukhova, is online as well. She's Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Psychology of Education and Pedagogy of St. Petersburg University. Can you hear us? Yes. You will have, as an academic advisor, you have the right to make a short statement before after the reviews of the Dissertation Council members, and I would like now you to switch off your camera and your sound, please, microphone. And since we are on in an online mode, I would like you to follow my instructions or the instructions of the IT support. If there's any problem with the sound or with the video, please let me know, and we'll try to fix the technical disturbance. And I would like to ask Elena Evgeny Vaknin to if there's any problem with my connection, then you will step in if you don't mind. Do other members of the Dissertation Council agree upon it? Yes. And so we're continuing. And so we are now broadcasting this Dissertation Council meeting on the website of St. Petersburg University, and also it is accompanied by simultaneous interpretation from Russian to English and from English into Russian. But also, I'd like to, and now I'd like to say that the electronic mail address is published on the webpage of the defendant, and if you have any questions to the defendant, you want to contact her online, then you can do that. And but also you have to sign your message and formulate your question in a concise and clear form. And the question should relate directly to the to our discussion. So and I continue. In accordance to federal law dated the 23rd of August 1996, number 127 on science and the policy, this state policy in scientific and technological sphere, St. Petersburg State University was awarded entitled the right to issue academic degrees independently according to its own rules, and a corresponding decree was then issued by the rector of St. Petersburg University, and in accordance with this act, we are conducting this session in accordance to this to the requirements. Not less than 2/3 of the established Dissertation Council membership should be online, and we have the five-member Dissertation Council. Six people are online, all in the interactive online mode. And I would like to also charge the curator of this Dissertation Council meeting, Natalia Yuryevna Rubtsova, to register a list of attendance for all the Dissertation Council members, and therefore, and also stipulate whether they're online or offline. And I would like to now talk about the agenda, the ruling order, the running order, short presentation of the chairperson of the dissertation on the paperwork, 5 minutes, a short presentation of the defendant, 15 minutes, questions to the candidate covering the content of her presentation, not more than 2 minutes per question, answers of the defendant, not more than 5 minutes, and then presentations of all members of the Dissertation Council with their reviews, for 10 minutes per speaker, and then there will be the Dissertation Council chairman's review read, and then we have answers, not more than 15 minutes of the defendant covering the issues raised in the reviews. There will be an open discussion, not more than 5 minutes per question. Then there will be concluding statements of the defendant regarding these questions, not more than 5 minutes. Then the chairperson will read out the review of the academic advisor of the defendant, and 5 minutes break before an open procedure for deliberation, and then open voting procedure, the counting of votes by the chairperson of the Dissertation Council, and to enter the data into the protocol, and then the verdict is taken, and then the concluding statement of the dissertation defendant. And if you have any questions, no questions, then I would like to continue our agenda and actually start with the first item. And please switch off the sound of the mobile telephones before we start. I am on mobile. My mobile, I cannot. That's all right. That's for your account, Banya. So let's continue. So the first item is a short presentation of the chairperson. The dissertation of Margarita Izotova, seeking a degree of Candidate of Psychological Sciences in the academic field 19.00.10 Correctional Psychology on the topic of correction of emotional sphere of adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardedness with music therapy was accepted for defense by the academic secretary of St. Petersburg University on the 30th January 2020. The dissertation council was then appointed by an act of the academic secretary. I already mentioned all the members of the academic council. Margarita Khadzhumarovna Izotova wrote her dissertation in St. Petersburg State Pediatric Medical University, affiliated with the Ministry of Healthcare of Russia and the academic council. The academic advisor of the dissertation is the professor of psychology of education and pedagogy of St. Petersburg University, Svetlana Timotheevna Poskova. The number of publications is 15 in the required Ministry of Education list. 5 publications, journals, 5 publications, and Web of Science and Scopus publications. There are no publications in those journals, and I also mentioned that there's one chapter in a book, one book chapter written by the dissertation author. So all the paperwork that were presented to Rubtsova and Natalia Yurievna is in accordance with the requirements. Do you have, if you have any questions, do we need to name all the list, the whole list of the paperwork for the defense? No questions, no need. Well, unfortunately, we don't have connection with Professor Matanova. Cannot see her. Natalia Yurievna, then we have to make a short break, then technical break. So we are now at the stage of a short presentation, a 15-minute presentation by the candidates seeking the degree. Margarita Khadzhumarovna, your turn to speak now. Please, Margarita Khadzhumarovna, switch on your sound if you're ready to present. Can you see the presentation? Yes, it is. We can see it. Dear Chairman, dear members of the Dissertation Council, let me bring to your attention a presentation of the dissertation on the topic correction of the emotional sphere of adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation by means of music therapy. One of the key tasks of modern correctional psychology is to develop effective ways to create barrier-free interpersonal relationships with people with disabilities. In this regard, it is necessary to search for such means of psychological assistance to persons with mental retardation, which would reveal the value of their inner world, the availability of psychological resources. Such a resource, of course, can be considered the emotional sphere, which, along with the other mental formation, ensures the success of social adaptation of the individual. However, in correctional psychology, there is a strong idea that undeveloped emotional sphere is characteristic of adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation. Their high emotional vulnerability, which impedes social interaction, determines the need for correction. Practical experience proves the high corrective potential of art therapy in solving the problems of dysontogenesis, which is known from the works of Komisarov, Levchenko, Mamaichuk, Medvedeva. At the same time, there's a distinct shortage of objective studies comparing the effectiveness of art therapy programs of various kinds, in particular with the use of music and without musical accompaniment. The need for such comparisons is associated with the expanding popularization of music therapy practices without a proper theoretical and experimental justification, which leads to the erasure of its uniqueness and the limit of correctional possibilities. The question remains open about the effectiveness of the impact of music on the emotional sphere of adolescents with mental retardation in the context of interpersonal interaction. Moreover, there was an opinion about the limitation of the use of music therapy in the correction of the emotional sphere of this group of adolescents in connection with the insufficiently developed analytical and syntactic activity. Thus, the problem arises of the correlation of musical impact, emotional and communicative spheres of adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation. To solve it, a study was organized with a goal of revealing substantive and structural changes in the emotional sphere that regulate the personal interaction of adolescents. Given the multifaceted, multi-level emotions reflected in different theories, we used the concept of emotional field in the study. The emotional sphere was considered as an integral dynamic formation of interconnected emotional manifestations, expressing the individual's selective attitude to the perceived surrounding reality and fulfilling the function of resource of interpersonal interaction in violation of intellectual process. Starting the study, we assumed that the expression of possibility of differentiation of emotion, the weakening of emotional and psychological stress, and the harmonization of the emotional component of communication amongst adolescents with a slight degree of mental agitation is due to a special organized musical impact. Musical influence contributing to the expansion of the spectrum of precise differential emotions creates the conditions for limiting aggressive tendencies and increasing empathic abilities of adolescents. The subject, object, and objects of the study are representatives. The theoretical and methodological basis was the fundamental precision. The study involved 193 adolescents aged 12 to 13 years old, of whom 99 were adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation, 94 were adolescents with the intact intelligence. The distribution of adolescents depending on the context of art therapy programs is presented on the slide. In addition, 900 parents, 192 parents and 3 experts were involved in the study. The corrective focus of the study determined the development of 2 art therapeutic programs, with the use of music and without music involvement and the involvement of parents in the study. The organizational characteristics of our therapy programs are presented on this slide. We emphasize that the program with the use of music was based on active, receptive, and integrative forms of music therapy. The specifics of each form are reflected on this slide. Thanks to the combination of these forms, a comprehensive, diverse impact of the emotional spheres of the adolescents. Allow me now to outline the main provisions of dissertation. The first position is presented on the slide, and it proves that the level of structural features of the emotional sphere of adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation do not provide the necessary constructive interpersonal interaction, which creates the condition for corrective intervention. From the presented results, it's seen that the emotional sphere of adolescents of retardation and intact intelligence is characterized by common and specific signs, which is confirmed statistically. Common signs include the ability to most accurately differentiate joy and anger, expressed schematically and mimically, and the presence of emotional barriers to communication. The differences are manifested in the fact that adolescents with mental retardation less accurate to differentiate and verbally denote emotions of different modality. They are characterized by more pronounced inadequate emotional response, the dominance of negative emotions, emotional rigidity, the rejection of emotional rapprochement with people, and the inability to control emotion, which creates barriers to interpersonal interaction. Also, is adolescence exposure to unconscious anxiety, a variety of fears, and psychological discomfort. Psychophysiological discomfort. Nevertheless, adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation are more prone to fears of natural and mystical phenomena, while maintaining emotional comfort in the situation of social restrictions. Intelligent teens are more likely to be afraid of being alone. The structure of the emotional sphere of adolescents of the compared groups is organized in the form of a 3-factor model and reflects the relationship of the emotional manifestations with empathy, which promotes interpersonal integration, and aggression, which implicates interpersonal communication. The of greatest importance for the organization of the emotional sphere is the inaccuracy in the differentiation of emotions expressed by appropriate facial expressions and schematically. Thus, we conclude that the emotional sphere of adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation does not provide the emotional response necessary for barrier-free interpersonal interaction, which requires the use of corrective measures. The choice of musical influence is corrective influence determined the need for proof that adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation are capable of perceiving music of different emotional content. We turn to the proof of the statement, which is fully presented on the slide. In the study, teens were asked to listen to fragments from musical works and in free form to describe the impressions and draw a picture. The results are presented on the slide. It turned out that adolescents with a slight degree of mental, like adolescents with a safe intent, are able to perceive the emotions of joy, anger, calmness, and sadness according to the emotional content of the music. At the same time, adolescents of both groups most accurately perceive the emotion of joy and music, and least accurately the emotion of sadness. Teenagers in both groups are able to create graphic images and color associations that match the emotional content of the music. Content analysis found that the images and the drawings of most teenagers made to the music of Mozart conveyed positive events, bright, sunny landscape, and the drawings of adolescents made to the music of Beethoven, bright and dynamic, often aggressive images and particular battles and destruction were reflected. Teenagers regarding to their intellectual development express the emotional content of Greeks music mainly through a landscape dominated by pictures of calm nature, the sea, sunny forests, glades, birds floating in the sky. The emotion of sadness in the music of Albinoni was also transmitted through the landscape. However, it depicted rainy, cloudy weather, dark clouds, clouds with occupied the whole sky. Despite similar trends in the perception of the emotional content of music, adolescents with metal agitation were less accurate in differentiating emotions and significant difficulties in verbal description. Noticeable was the mismatch in the accuracy of perception of emotions in music and facial expressions, which prevents the manifestation of empathy. This is indicated by the results of correlation analysis. The differences between the groups were the difficulties in conveying the nuances of emotional experience. Thus, adolescents with a mild degree of mental retardation did not distinguish between mild sadness and deep sadness. The results formed the basis, which it's presented in the slide. We proved the third position. To prove the situation, we use the dynamics of the results for different forms of art therapeutic effects relative to the initial setting. On the slide, we detected changes are presented in the form of profiles. In general, both programs contribute to the expansion of size of emotional comfort and the complication of emotional experience of adolescents with a slight mention. However, the specificity of art therapeutic effect using music is found in greater severity of positive changes in the emotional state. Thus, the expansion of the spectrum to precisely differentiable emotions was expressed in the fact that, in addition to joining mimic and anger, mimically complex emotions of surprise, contempt, guilt, sadness, calmness, fear were more accurately identified. The increase in the accuracy of differentiation of emotions reached 0.7 points for pictograms, 0.5 points for photographs. At the same time, the positive effect of the usual art therapy program was limited to an increase of 0.2 or 0.3 points respectively. The positive influence of positive was also seen in the expanding the zone of the subjective comfort in a group of teenagers with mental retardation. This was expressed in a more noticeable increase in unconscious anxiety and general psychophysiological stress. A comparison of the profiles shows that the deviation was in the range from 0.1 to 6.4 months. The profile of adults engaged without musical accompaniment reflects less pronounced positive changes that do not exceed 2.8 points. Participation in the program with the use of music has led to a more noticeable decrease in emotional barriers in communication, from 1.4 to 10.1 points. We can assume that in general, the emotional sphere of adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation is more sensitive to the effects of music than to art therapy without music. It's likely that music possessing the harmony and interconnectedness of all the expressive elements caused a diverse range of experiences in the adolescents with a mild degree of mental retardation. Since emotions are expressed more deeply and fully by the means of music than by words and colors, so far its perception is always emotional. In addition, in music, modeling of emotions is carried out by different rhythm, intonation, harmonic, and timbre means, which contributes to a deep feeling of emotional and encoding its appropriation. Similar trends are observed in the group of adolescents with intact intelligence. Note that the positive changes in aggression and empathy were also more pronounced in the adolescents with a slight degree of mental irritation when participating in an art therapy program using music. The interaction of the emotional and communicative spheres of adolescence is reflected in the following position presented in the slide. Factor analysis showed that the importance of reduced emotional discomfort and consistency in the differentiation of emotion for constructive interpersonal interaction. The positive role of emotions was manifested in the decrease in general aggressiveness and a limitation of the zones of its manifestations in increasing empathy. The structure of the emotion sphere in a group of teenagers with mental retardation who participated without musical accompaniment reflects the significance of the emotional stress arising from the limitation of aggression and the mismatch in the differentiation of emotions, which determines aggressive behavior, while expanding the zone of constructive interpersonal interaction. And the effect of music in a group of teenagers with a safe interact is concentrated on ensuring the relative independence of manifestations of the emotional sphere and the sphere of interpersonal interaction, with positive changes in each of them. Conventionally, it can be designated as an expansion of the considered as an expansion of the zone of emotional and communicative comfort. Therefore, thanks to this trinity, the trinity of emotions of music, emotions of adolescence, and the emotions carried out by others, adolescents with mental retardation become more sensitive to certain aspects of interpersonal interactions. Despite this, we emphasize that music theory preserves level differences between adolescents with mental retardation and intact intelligence and emotional response, which continue to correspond to this type of dysontogenesis. We can only talk about the similarity in the direction of changes in the emotional sphere and interpersonal interaction with different groups of adolescents. Thank you for your attention, and not about the level of superiority of adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation. Do you have any questions from members of the Dissertation Council? Margarita Khadzhumarovna, if you look at slide number 16, when you present factor structure of the atmospheric sphere, and you identify three main factors: mental retarded, as conflict, professional stress, and the third, and the discord in the differentiation of emotions. Could you elaborate on the interrelation of these factors? Unfortunately, I cannot see my own presentation, but I can comment. The factors of discorded emotions. These are emotions of empathy and anger. The disabled kids cannot identify by the facial expression what emotion is expressed, and therefore they react aggressively. And the next factor, emotional stress that provoke communicative problems. The emotional stress that are experienced by these endos, they show in an aggressive way, again directed at surrounding people. And the third, emotional conflict as a condition of aggression. So how do you understand that? Emotional conflict. This is a factor. The emotional is a factor which is a condition for aggression. There's a factor. There is the inability for the mentally disabled kids to understand emotions. This is also involved some kinds of observing their kids by their parents, and so the influence of music will lead them to build a more constructive interaction. Please. I have a question for the chairperson. Well, the difficulty of differentiation of emotions. How is this different from the the term you use of discord of identifying emotions. These are synonyms. Discord or and identification, the identification of difficulty of differentiating emotions. This is also in the papers by Shklar. Oksana Vladimirovna, your picture is gone. Yelena Evgenievna. I can see everybody, and I'm here. I can see everybody. I can hear everybody. Just as Yelena Evgen, unfortunately, then probably now she's back. So Professor Skar uses these concepts as synonymous concepts. So we just followed her terminology. Thank you for the question, Lyudmila Sergeyevna. Members of the Dissertation Council, please ask your questions covering the presentation, content of the presentation. I have no questions. Well, our colleagues, now we can continue our agenda. External reviews, according to me, there are no external reviews for the dissertation. All the reviews of the Dissertation Council members have been published on the website of St. Petersburg University, and they're accessible there. And now I would like I would like you to concentrate on your questions and issues with the dissertation, clearly put. So let's continue. Let's continue with the reviews. Then you can, Margarita can switch off your microphone, and Mednikova Ludmila, your turn. Dear members of the dissertation chairperson, dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the Dissertation Council for the opportunity to be part of it, to discuss the dissertation of Margarita Khadzhumarovna. The work is well written and is an easy read, and therefore my review was an easy act to put together as well. And so the relevance of the review is obvious in the context of socialization of disabled teenagers and expanding their sphere of life, and the prerequisite of it is communicative skills of the individuals, and the timeliness of this work is also due to the needs of a school education, the school education system, and including the psychological assistance of these kids. There's a shortage of studies that on correctional approaches and the the actualization of emotional resources, makes it impossible to implement practical approaches in the school setting. And so, and so music as a means of correction is an important tool, and it's an art, and it has always been used to correct emotional disorders, and it's very hard to it's very useful in our endeavors to stimulate the emotional sphere of the teenagers. Comparative data are important between the intact intellectual adolescents with intact intellect and mental retardation. And this comparative study revealed a lot of important insights, and what has been proven: high response of such adolescents to music, and also the dissertation author shows that the emotions play in an essential role in building interactions, social interactions, and relationships. And the kids live through their emotions and show, and they can depict their emotions, and so the exposure, their exposures to a comprehensive influence of different means of art therapy, and the experimental part of the station is great as far as the credibility of the dissertation results. It is based on a lot of evidence on the correct use of methods in psychology, and that integrates the word, the sign, and the music, the sound, and therefore the credibility as also is based on the representatives of the representativeness of the data, and the theoretical significance of the research lies in the proof, the conclusive proof of the positive effect of music therapy on the teenagers with mental retardation. The author elaborates on the and clarifies the factors that that prevent such teenagers from interacting with the world, and the theoretical significance is that there are two general and specific factors identified and described in the techniques that deal with them as well. This research expands the possibility of the corrective possibilities of art therapy, music therapy. This is a practice-oriented work and has practical significance both as for in psychodiagnostics, but also in corrective treatment. And there's a system of correctional measures that can be used in writing programs of psychological assistance, not only for this group of adolescents, but of other groups of adolescents. And especially in dysfunctional families, when there are not very few positive influences on the individuals, the young people. And this work also of cultural significance for cultural studies. It's it's characterized by in-depth knowledge and very a logical use of theoretical provisions in the practical part. This is a rounded work, well written in academic language, and it has different diagrams and other infographics, and we can see that the author is was interested in expressing the content in the most in the best way, but there are also drawbacks. The emotional content of and child psychology. What the author turns to the clinical psychology database. Well, the should have turned to the clinical base database of clinical psychology, and that would have enriched the dissertation. And also on page 122, there's a discord of the phenomenology of using different terms. Author also mentions not only structural but level differentiation of different emotions. And the question is on what basis do you approach the psychological sphere of the adolescents, but this criticism is not of a conceptual basis, and they don't diminish the overall quality of the dissertation. The dissertation of Izotova, Margarita, Khadzhumarovna on the corrective psychology for adolescents with a mild degree of retardedness conforms fully to the requirements of St. Petersburg University regarding the awarding of academic degrees and in the said university, and therefore Margarita Izotova is entitled to be awarded the sought degree. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lyudmila Sergeyevna. I would like to remind all the other members of the station that the defendant, we decided that the defendant will answer all questions and criticisms after all the reviews. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to ask Matasov, Professor Matasov, Yuri Timofeyevich, dear members of the station council, dear chairperson, in accordance with the requirements, I will start with the relevance of the topic. Well, Vygotsky first posited it, and now it still survives, the emotional sphere of adolescence and the corrective measures that are required for it to normalize this sphere are in great demand. Well, the goal of this dissertation is to compare mentally retarded children and children with intact intellectual abilities, and therefore the validity of this is supported by a lot of experimental data and the analysis at a very high degree of with a high degree of quality. Well, the author proved that the dissertation that the music therapy can highly improve the emotional sphere of these adolescents, and well, and especially with in connection with speech production. And as far as the practical relevance, it's because based on the representative data, the author showed the possibilities of optimization of the affective sphere of mentally retarded children with the use of art therapeutic programs. The theoretical significance is that the important statement in special psychology that for a significant correctional effect, it's important to concentrate corrective efforts on the most safely intact functions of mentally retarded children, and we know that the affective sphere is in comparison with the intellectual sphere is more intact with them, and therefore we're actually affecting the right sphere. The practical significance is that these methodologies open up great opportunities to construct psychological and pedagogical training and processes for mentally retarded children, and therefore by indirectly overcoming their drawbacks in the intellectual sphere or bypassing them, and then focusing on the affective side. Therefore, the novelty, the originality of the work, and the validity of the results prove that that the dissertation of Margarita Izotova corresponds directly to, well, meets directly the requirements of St. Petersburg University that relate to the awarding of academic degrees of kinds of sciences, psychological sciences, and therefore Izotova Margarita Khadzhumarovna is entitled to be awarded the third degree of candidate of psychological sciences in the degree field 190010 correctional psychology. Now we are going on, and the third review, the review by Elena Baknin. Thank you very much for letting me be a reviewer of this work. One of the key tasks of contemporary correctional psychology is to find psychological resources of no barrier social interaction of individuals with disabilities, and therefore, and especially this problem is the most acute when we deal with mental retardedness, mental disabilities, because with intellectual deficit, the relationships and the interaction with the objective reality suffers as well. There's a narrowness of the picture of the world. There are barriers of communication, and they're very clear. And therefore, the socialization and social adaptation are impeded. And as teenagers, we should find resources for socialization and adaptation, and they are placed in the emotional sphere. And therefore, these kids have very weak regulation, willful regulation of their emotions. They are prone to different effects, and as a result, they have difficulties in social adaptation. The resourcefulness of emotion and social interaction of such teenagers are often understudied and disregarded, and therefore the dissertation of Izotova Margarita Khadzhumarovna fills this gap, this academic significance, of course, because the author creatively treats the findings of general and correctional psychology that relate to the emotional sphere of teenagers, and therefore this gave her the ability to come up with very interesting findings and very interesting research hypotheses about the expansion of emotional capabilities of teenagers with mild retardedness under the influence of a specially organized musical impact. The hypothesis, of course, then impacted on the logic of the dissertation, and the research became multifactorial and comprehensive. From a scientific point of view, it's important that the dissertation considers a whole range of emotional manifestations of teenagers, including the differentiation of emotions, anxiety and fears, emotional barriers to communication, and the general psychophysiological stress and tension. And then when she combines all of them in the correctional way, it's very, very important to see that the phenomena then receive holistic treatment, and the phenomena of musical therapy um, um, uh, acquires justification in the resourcefulness of the emotional sphere. Well, we have to say that the defendant, in addition to the level description of the indicators of the emotional and communicative spheres, also describes the structural organization of each sphere and the dynamic interactions and interconnectedness between them under the influence of different art therapeutic programs. This approach emphasizes the integrative character of the research, and due to this integrative approach, there's a real possibility of building arguments arguments for using music art therapy for teenagers with mild retardedness and the resourcefulness of the emotional spheres. And new facts were revealed because of this multifaceted approach, including a new proof of the effectiveness of musical therapy. She states that irrespective of the specific intellectual development, musical exposure in the structure of our therapeutic programs leads to an increase in the accuracy of differentiating emotions in these subjects, and the improvement of their desire to emotionally involve in communication, and also lower the intensity of negative emotions also including the decrease of anxiety, aggressiveness, and hostility, and other sides of psychophysiological tension, and also leads to the transformation of the significance of different fears and anxieties. And the defendant proves that before our therapeutic program with a musical component, the emotional sphere of these teenagers was characterized by a lower accuracy of differentiating emotions and the general psychophysiological tension, etc. And when they did participate in those programs, then they had a less emotional discomfort in interacting with other people, and the decrease in emotional tension, and the emotions that they received from music led to the decrease in general aggressiveness and the containment of the zones of the manifestations of this aggressiveness and the increase in empathy. And so specialists, practitioners, the practical significance of dissertation is also great because specialists who work with such children have received a well thought out justification of the effectiveness of musical therapy for optimizing psychological conditions of social integration of teenagers with mild mental retardedness, and therefore they can now, which would lead to their wider interaction with the institutions of culture and people. And the practical significance also is based on the richness of material for further diagnostics of the emotional and communicative spheres of teenagers, not only with mild retardedness, but of normal development, and also the author actually develops a whole methodology of using music therapy. The validity of the results and the credibility of the results is based on the methodology used in the research, which draws from classical Russian and foreign studies that focus on mental retardedness as a special type of dysontogenesis, and also it presents a contemporary vision of mental retardedness as a biopsychosocial phenomenon, and therefore, but also I would like to say that the methodology was used very correctly, very accurately. The specific character of the impact of music therapy is described for all types of teenagers, and this is very important. And of course, there are some questions that may further the researcher. The research first one is the credibility of the results based on the representatives of the data is obvious. However, there is a question regarding how the level of interact was determined that took part in the research. And second is the effectiveness of musical exposure is traditionally determined by the ability of an individual to identify emotions in sounding music. But there's a question, but the research presents the emotional sphere by a wide range of manifestations, and the question is why this multi-component approach to the determination of the emotional sphere of teenagers, and especially teenagers with mental retardedness. The third one is the high practical significance makes us begs this question, where, in what educational institutions the proposed methodology has been used. If you can reply to that. The dissertation also proves, well, convinces us in the good possibility, the resourcefulness of musical therapy for regulation of the emotional sphere. But what about the impact that would compare or show the eidetic emotional reaction of teenagers with different intellectual development levels. However, all these questions don't diminish the significance of the dissertation, the value of the dissertation. I would just say that that the bibliography includes 276 sources, out of which 86 sources in foreign languages, and we have 38 tables, 37 figures, 15 academic scientific publications, and 6 journals, including 6 journals recommended by the Higher Attestation Committee, and also one Scopus. And therefore, in view of all this, I would like to say that the dissertation fully meets the requirements set by the Act on the procedure of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, and the candidate Izotova Margarita Khadzhumarovna is entitled to being awarded this degree. Thank you very much for your very substantive review. And now, Matanova Koleva from, thank you very much, from Bulgaria. The station of Margarita Izotova is connected with the searching for psychological assistance to teenagers with mental retardation, using their the inner world and the resources. In the resources, as you know, emotions are connected with the psychological mental organization, and they have play a very important role in building interpersonal relationships. Therefore, I would like to point out very important advantage of the stations. For the first time, a comparative study of the changes in the emotional sphere of teenagers with mental retardedness and intact intellect under the influence of art therapy has been described, and therefore, and not only art therapy, but in a more narrow sense, the music therapy and the trends of the changes in the emotional sphere between these two groups were identified, and also how the barriers and the boundaries of interpersonal communication has been get dropped. The theoretical significance of dissertation lies in the fact that methodological prerequisites and the avenues for the prospects of the study of emotional development of teenagers with mental retardedness are made clear. The theoretical in the theoretical way, our understanding of the structural organization of the emotional sphere in these teenagers has been expanded, and the author analyzed connections between individual components of the emotional sphere and the factors which can prevent or at the same time assist in interpersonal communication and interaction of teenagers with different intellectual levels. The practical significance is manifested in the fact that the author has developed methodologies that expand the possibilities of psychodiagnostics of the emotional sphere and interpersonal interaction of teenagers. The results can be used by art therapists and music therapists in their practical activities. The validity of the results. The validity of the results is based on the methodological approach, on the correctness of methods, the choice of the methods, the representatives of the data, etc. Well, I have some questions. First, active or receptive music therapy. Do you recommend active or receptive music therapy to be used with teenagers with mental retardedness? Have you used musicians to select music pieces for your musical therapy study? And this, in my conclusion, I stated that the dissertation of Izotova Margarita Khadzhumarovna fully meets the requirements of St. Petersburg University that relate to the awarding of academic degrees, and therefore Margarita Izotova is entitled to this degree. Thank you very much. Vanya, I would like now present my review, and of course I'll shorten it. And again, this is a review for the dissertation and correction of emotional sphere of teenagers with mild retardedness, mental retardedness, with the use of musical therapy. Well, the main advantage of this dissertation is that that she fully fulfills the goal of this dissertation. That she selects musical pieces with the help of musical experts, music experts, and also she did a lot of work on making teenagers with mental retardedness to concentrate on the music, and also the correct focus is the emotional sphere is the correct focus of this study, and what's more important, the research also includes a comparative study of teenagers with mental retardedness and with normal intellectual development. And this is important. Also, the regionality of the research is manifest in the fact that there's a comparative study of the effects of musical therapy and art therapy without using any music, and the author has identifies both general and specific contextual characteristics of the effects, and then the main thing is that, and an interesting result is that both disabled, both normal and disabled teenagers react in an emotional way to music, and also there's been a lot of experimental work done on identifying the abilities of teenagers, mentally disabled teenagers, to accurately identify emotions, and also the productiveness and concentration of attention have been determined. The dissertation, Margarita Khadzhumarovna, it has a very strong empirical component, a multifaceted analysis of musical exposure, and she proves that musical background can actually lower the aggressiveness of such teenagers and help them to build better interactive patterns. The author also develops a design of musical therapy, music therapy programs, and art therapy programs without any musical component, and therefore, and depending on the reactions of different teenagers, and she also determines the reactions to different modalities of art therapy. And again, the advantages is that the music pieces are correctly chosen. As colleagues already said, 14 methods, methodologies have been used in the research, and that's a very good picture, and also important the illustrative material, the subject's drawings are presented, and also the study involved the subject's parents, which is also very important. On the whole, therefore, I would say that that this is a great work, but of course it has some drawbacks. This critiques are of not such a conceptual matter. The author, nevertheless, I will voice them. The author used two art therapeutic programs, but art therapy programs, but in the text of the station, the description of only one program with the use of music was presented, and the other forms of art therapy were not described. On page 37, the dissertation states that psychological and accompanying physiological effects are created by all physical qualities of music. Please clarify. And why this is important for the practical parts of the work, and why do you then the questions use what is the length of the positive effect of the exposure to music. Second one, you use expert opinions of the parents. Why did you involve the parents as experts? The third question, will the effectiveness of art therapy, music art therapy, remain if not you but other specialists use it? On the whole, my conclusion is that the dissertation fully complies with the requirements of St. Petersburg University on the procedure of awarding academic degrees in St. Petersburg State University, and therefore the defendant Margarita Izotova is entitled to be awarded the third degree of candidate of psychological sciences and the degree field 190010 correctional psychology. Now the Margarita Khadzhumarovna has the opportunity to answer questions and criticism. Thank you very much. I will, dear Ludmila Sergeyevna, thank you for your, I am sincerely grateful to you for your attitude to the work and your comments, and that can positively affect the further development of the problems of the station. Despite the fact that your personal research was devoted to preschoolers, many aspects of the impact of rhythm are consonant with those that were laid down by us in the correctional program involving teenagers. The rhythmic possibilities of music and the structure of a holistic musical impact were used by us to regulate the emotional and communicative process of adolescence. For example, rhythm was taken into account in mitigating aggression and emotional stress. In terms of the terms, mismatch and inconsistency were used by us as synonyms, and phenomenologically meant the lack of uniqueness of differentiation and expression of emotions using different means. For example, emotions recognized through music and facial expressions did not always coincide. It is this mismatch that complicated communication process. Although in psychology, and number three, also in psychology, the conceptual level is widely used not only for the qualitative characteristics of phenomena medium, low, high, but also for the qualitative, not only for the quantitative characteristic, but qualitative description of mental organization, sensory, perceptual, etc. And in our work, we use digital values of indicators as a characteristic of the level. A number of level characteristics were set in the methods used, in particular in surveillance maps and surveillance and observing maps. Empathy was considered by us as a property contributing to the expansion of the boundaries of communication. Therefore, in the study, we used the method of multi-communicative empathy proposed by Professor Yusupov, reflecting the attitude of various objects of communication, including parents, children, etc. since the study involved adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation. Not all methods that traditionally measure the qualitative aspects of entry are applicable. This is what made us even modify the Yusupov methodology for more objective results. This methodology was duplicated by the observation map, and which was filled in by the parents. In terms of, now I would like to reply to Professor Matasov. Allow me to thank you for reading the work. First of all, we want to clarify the expression regardless of the level of intelligence, in particular found on page 111. With this phrase, we wanted to emphasize the emotional barriers are inherent in the communication of many adolescents with both intellectual disabilities and tactile issues. Next, we indicate the specifics of each group. You're right that Professor Isaev in his work Mental Retardation in Children and Adolescents 2003 indicates that only in 35% of the cases etiology is reliably established. However, in some other works of Isaev, he gives other figures in the dependence of research context in respect to the research. In particular, the abstract of the 2014 conference and the risky behavior of adolescents with intellectual disabilities living in residential institutions. Yuri Timofeyevich, we accept all comments regarding the stylistic errors. Of course, as far as in terms of according to the results of the study, we can argue that the structure of it's number 4 of the structure of the emotional sphere is sensitive to the characteristics of the therapeutic effect. And if music therapy promotes harmonization of the emotional sphere in the form of reducing emotional stress and ensures consistency in the differentiations of emotions, art therapy without musical impact does not create such harmonization. Drawing, dance, and other forms of art therapy will undoubtedly positively affect emotional and communicative manifestations, but do not create a systemic positive change. It is music, due to its emotional expressiveness and wide emotional range, that acts more systematically. Dear Elena Sergeyevna, thank you very much for your... I'm sorry, Elena Evgenievna. Sorry, I would like to thank you for the interest. The intelligence levels of adolescents with a mild degree of mental retardation was determined in 2 ways. Firstly, intellectual development was diagnosed in PMPK and reflected in medical records. Secondly, the Wechsler test was conducted to clarify the level of intelligence immediately before the study. Teenagers with intact intelligence were not studied using the Wechsler test since they were initially enrolled in the comprehensive school and did not have significant learning programs. The multi-component approach to the study of the emotional sphere of adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation was due to the fact that it was necessary to find the most significant manifestations that facilitate socialization and inclusive process. That's why the emotional sphere included, first of all, those components that are associated with interpersonal interaction. Currently, the program is fully or partially implemented in the work of such organizations of Parental Bridge, Garordi, and some other psychology centers. Based on the point of view of Vygotsky regarding the impact of art on a person's vital feelings, we admit that musical influence has mechanisms that affect the emotional sphere of both adolescents and these mechanisms musical influence that mechanisms that affect the emotional sphere of both adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation and adolescents with a safe thing. These mechanisms include, above all, catharsis and the transformation of the emotional sphere. Thus, music not only expresses the diversity of emotional experiences, it also makes listeners feel these emotions. That is, combines with expression of emotions and actualization of the psychological and physiological post their experience. Oksana Vladimirovna, I'm grateful for you for reading the work. Let me answer you. We use two art therapy programs. And since the purpose of the study was to uncover the role of music in changing the emotional and communicative spheres of adolescents with a slight degree of mental retardation, the emphasis was on describing the design of a program using music. Limitations of the scope of the dissertation did not allow the design of the second program to be presented. Of course, all means of music therapy but we need a synthetic approach. That's why we didn't focus on individual approaches. We used it as a complex. And as far as the effectiveness in terms of duration, we didn't focus on that. We used a different section. The impacts, the positive impact, yes, decreased, but the observation of the parents showed that it still remained over time. To improve, if the parents were involved because they actually increased the credibility of the data and the study results. As far as the last question, we went away from got away from the rigid structure of every class. We looked at the tempo of the group, and the psychologists and now can adapt this program to their audience. Dear Professor Vanya Lukov, thank you very much for your careful attitude to the dissertation, for the questions that allow us to reveal the qualitative aspects of the impact of music on the emotional sphere of adolescents. Indeed, both active and receptive forms of music therapy were used in correctional work. The choice of both forms is determined by the specific impact. So the active form was used to a great extent to relieve tension, aggression, and communication problems. At the same time, the receptive form, due to the rich sound of various instruments and emotional richness, was used to regulate and differentiate emotions and develop emotional responsiveness. For example, sadness can be used in Mussorgsky, in Schumann, and the same emotion will be reflected in different ways. The second question, I would like to thank the expert musicians and music therapists for their help in selecting musical works, in particular the musicians of the president of the Musical Olympus Foundation, Irina Nikitina, Natalia Zamoyskaya, music therapist Jay Moreno. He would be offered a range of emotions according to the concept of ISAR. For each emotion, the expert selected the appropriate music. At the same time, various nuances of the same emotion were taken into account. For example, the emotion of sadness was musically reflected in the range from painful, mournful to light sadness. Thank you. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, do we have any comments or clarifications regarding to what we heard from Margarita Khadzhumarovna, your reviews? Question. I'm totally satisfied with the answers. I am satisfied. Thank you very much. Lyudmila Sergeyevna, thank you. Margarita Khadzhumarovna, I'm satisfied with your answers. Yuri Timofeyevich, I am also satisfied, and I would like to ask for clarification. You said about parents who saw changes in such teenagers. What are the changes that they observed, that you observed, the parents? These changes had to do with in the behavior of their teenagers, the decrease in aggressiveness towards their peers and other people, and the aggressiveness became more manageable, and there were elements of reining in aggression, and the most pronounced changes had to do with empathy. The parents noticed receptiveness, more receptiveness towards themselves and to their brothers and sisters, and less aggression towards animals. Thank you. Thank you very much, Margarita Khadzhumarovna. I checked the questions that we could have received by email. No additional questions have been submitted, so therefore we can continue with our agenda and to give the floor to the academic advisor. Please switch on your Svetlana Timofeyevna, switch on your sound and camera, and tell us about your interaction with the defendant and her work. Svetlana Timofeyevna, we cannot. Yes, now we can see. We can see your lower part. Please put it down. No. Yeah. Perfect. Svetlana. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, dear chairperson, thank you very much for finding in this difficult time. I find the time to discuss Margarita Khadzhumarovna's work. This is a very long way from the art school from Franz Joseph Island, where she was, and she is the person who can overcome difficulties. She is a very sensitive researcher to challenges, but also she is also a very talented psychotherapist and a teacher, school teacher, and this is Margarita is also a great person, a very independent woman, and a morally exemplary person. And she's also very sensitive to the tragedies of young people, because Beslan was not only the only not the only military conflict that she was involved in and helped out other people, but I would like Margarita to Margarita's life be full with joy and success. Thank you very much, dear members of the council. Since we're working online, do you have or the defendant herself any questions that outstanding questions that have to do with the technical side of the everything is okay? Yes. Then one more management issue. Will we have a closed period of time for deliberations, and then we'll switch off the broadcast? If you don't think that it's necessary, then we can continue our open session and then proceed with open voting, please. I think open voting procedure is desirable. Elena Evgenia, do you agree? I think we've said enough, and we can vote now. So I'm putting to the vote the resolution to award a candidate of sciences, psychological sciences degree to Margarita Khadzhumarovna Izotova. I just remind you that the decision is taken if not fewer than 3 members of the Station Council vote in favor of the decision. Axon, should I say? Should you say? You can say. You can comment on your opinion, or just say, I vote for the decision. I support this work. I vote for the awarding of the third degree to Margarita Khadzhumarovna Izotova. Yuri Timofeyevich, I'm in favor of awarding this third degree. And a few remarks. I think theoretically correct, not to influence the optimization of the sphere, but to go indirectly of the intellectual sphere as the safest sphere in such adolescence. And this way, the success of such corrective work is guaranteed. So I'm going to vote for the resolution to grant the third degree. Elena Evgenievna, dear colleagues, I'm voting for the decision to award the degree of candidate of psychological sciences. And again, thank you very much. Matanova Koleva Vanilova. Dear colleagues, I am voting to support the awarding of the degree. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I would like to side with your estimation of this work, and I am voting for the resolution. I think this is a very promising study, and I would like to see new methodological guidelines based on the work that you've done over several years. And dear colleagues, dear guests, all those who are watching us online, out of 5 members of the Dissertation Council present, 5 members voted for the decision to grant the third degree. No abstentions, and no one voted against the decision, and therefore the resolution to the decision to grant Margarita Izotova the degree of candidate of psychological sciences is taken, and therefore 2 members of the Dissertation Council or the defendant do they have any questions on the procedural side of the dissertation? Is everyone satisfied with the work of the Dissertation Council? Yes. Therefore, the concluding remarks from the candidate. Please, Margarita Khadzhumarovna. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you, for making it possible to have this defense, and thank you very much for such an attentive attitude to the work. Thank you very much. My thanks to the university and my academic advisor. Huge gratitude for the ethical attitude, the support, and the academic interest that she has infused me with. Thank you. We're congratulating the defendant. The session is now officially closed. Thank you, all members of the Dissertation Council. If no objections are in place, then this Dissertation Council is officially